The rain on Sigma Novis 4 wasn't water. It was a thin, acidic drizzle that hissed against the reinforced canopy of the observation blind. Inside, Kthal, the Xinthian Survey Corps, watched the feed from the remote drones. His four multifaceted eyes blinked in a slow, disappointed rhythm. The creature on the screen was underwhelming. Designated Subject Gamma 777, human. It was a bipedal mammalian carbon unit of medium build, currently attempting to build a fire under a rocky overhang. It moved with a clumsy desperation, its soft skin already showing angry red welts from the acidic rain. Its technological signature upon crash landing had been promising, a primitive fission reactor, complex metallurgy, but the being itself seemed fragile. Its teeth were flat, useless for rending. Its claws were blunt stubs. It possessed no natural armor, no venom sacs, no cloaking chromatophores. For Class 7 Deathworlder, it was a paradox. All that potential encased in such a vulnerable package. "This is the apex predator from a death world," rumbled Vorax beside him, his massive, armored form taking up half the blind. A Jurgaran, his species were the galaxy's premier big-game hunters. "It looks like a larval Grishnak. A sick one. Is the only survivor of the wreck," Kthal chirped, his mandibles clacking. The data sift from their ship's black box indicates a species of remarkable resilience and adaptability. Their homeworld has gravity 1.5 standard, extreme temperature variance, rampant microbial life, and frequent tectonic events. Adaptability is not ferocity. Vorax snorted, steam venting from his cranial plates. "I have hunted silk WYRMS on molten plains. I have tracked ice shriekers across glacial chasms. This thing, it trembles. It is prey behavior. Katal agestid adayo. Perhaps. But the Council's directive is clear. We observe. We catalog. We do not interfere. The human quarantine is the most stringent law in the Galactic Concord. For 300 cycles, since first contact with their kind ended in the incident at Procyon Prime, no one approaches their space. Their file is sealed under crimson clearance." Vorax flexed his killing claws, the metallic tips scraping together. A quarantine out of fear of this? The Procyon incident is a myth, a story to frighten nestlings. Look at it. On the screen, the human had finally gotten a feeble flame going, huddling over it, its body shaking. It is pathetic. It will not last the night. The acid storms will dissolve its shelter. But Kthal noticed something the hunter did not. The human wasn't just shivering from cold or fear. Its shoulders were moving in a steady, rhythmic pattern. As the drone's audio sensors filtered out the hiss of rain, a sound emerged. Not a whimper, but a low, tuneless hum. The human was looking at the fire, then at the corrosive rain beyond its shelter, then at a piece of twisted wreckage in its hand. Its eyes, two forward-facing orbs in a sea of pale skin, held not despair, but a sharp, calculating focus. That night, the human did not die. When the drone's thermal imaging switched on, Kthal saw the human had used metallic sheeting from the wreck to channel the acidic drips away from its fire and sleeping nook. It had fashioned a crude filter from its own clothing and charcoal from its fire to collect drinkable condensation. It had also, Kthal saw with a start, set simple but effective snares around the overhang, using strands of wire from its ship's ruined electrical systems. The creature was not just enduring, it was engineering. Vorax was unimpressed. Clever vermin. It prolongs the inevitable. The predators of this zone, the razor feathers, will find it by dawn. They can smell weakness. Dawn came, the acid rain abating to a toxic mist. The human was awake, chewing on the stringy, unappetizing root of a local tuber it had dug up. Suddenly, the air was pierced by shrieks. 3 razor feathers, avian predators with beaks like serrated crystal and wingspans of 4 meters, descended from the ochre sky. They were fast, vicious, and hunted in packs. Vorax leaned forward, a predator's gleam in his own eyes. Now we see its end. It has no hope. The human saw them coming. It did not freeze. It did not run into the open. It moved with a sudden, shocking economy. It kicked its small fire apart, scattering burning embers in a half-circle towards the advancing predators, causing the lead razor feather to shriek and flare back. Then it grabbed its only tool, a long, sharpened piece of metal strut, and backed into the narrowest part of the rock crevice, forcing the predators to come at it one at a time. The first razor feather lunged. The human didn't try to meet the charge. It sidestepped with a speed that belied its earlier clumsiness, letting the creature's momentum carry it past, and drove the metal strut not into its body, but into the joint of its wing. The shriek was deafening. The second predator attacked, as the first flailed. The human took a glancing blow from a crystal beak that ripped a gash across its chest, but used the closeness to jam a still smoldering ember from the ground into the creature's eye sac. The third razor feather, seeing two of its pack maimed and shrieking, hesitated. The human stood, bleeding, weapon raised, and let out a sound. It was not a roar of triumph or a scream of rage. It was a deep, guttural shout, short and sharp, that echoed off the rocks. Then it took a single, deliberate step forward. The third razor feather fled. The human immediately dropped its defensive stance, its breath coming in ragged gasps. It tended to its wound with methodical haste, using a paste made from crushed lichen it had gathered earlier, then secured the area. It did not celebrate. It simply went back to work, skinning the dead razor feather with its shard of metal, harvesting the crystal-like talons and beak. In the blind, the silence was profound. Vorax stared at the screen. The human hadn't won through brute strength or natural weaponry. It had used terrain, tool, fire, and a terrifyingly efficient understanding of anatomy and aggression. It had turned a defensive position into a killing ground. It had turned a predator's hesitation into its own victory. Interesting, Vorax finally said, the word rumbling like distant thunder. There was no disdain in his voice now. There was a new, cold curiosity. It does not fight like a beast. It fights like a tactician, a cruel one. Kthal felt a chill that had nothing to do with the atmosphere. It is a survivor, Vorax. That is all. We must log this and report. But Vorax was no longer listening to the Zynthian. The hunter's code was simple. The greater the challenge, the greater the glory. To his people, the ultimate trophy was not from a beast, but from a thinking, determined foe. A worthy adversary. The Galactic Concord's laws were abstract, distant things. The challenge on the screen was real, immediate, and intoxicating. As Kthal compiled his report, Vorax made a decision. He would not report this find. The human was alone, unprotected, and unregistered. It was, for all intents and purposes, not under Concord protection if no one knew it was here. It was the perfect quarry, a hunt that would be spoken of for generations. He would take its skull, that oddly domed, fragile-looking thing, and place it at the pinnacle of his trophy hall. He would be the first to hunt the forbidden species. He slipped a private communicator from his gear. For Ux2 Yuganot. Prepare my personal hunt ship for planetfall. Silent protocols. I have found a special project. Kthal turned, his mandibles clicking in alarm. Fox, what are you doing? The quarantine. The law. The law, Vorax said, powering up his heavy plasma caster, does not understand the hunt. You observe, scribe. I will show you why even the killers of the galaxy would dare not hunt these things. I will show you, and then there will be no question left. He pushed open the blind's hatch, the acidic mist swirling around his formidable frame. Below, in the valley, the human had finished its butchering and was looking up directly at the hidden blind's location, as if sensing the new, more dangerous attention. It held a razor feather's crystal talon in its hand, examining its edge. The hunt, for both of them, had truly begun. The human, who thought of itself as Eli, wiped the acidic residue from his forehead with the back of a torn sleeve. The pain from the gash on his chest was a steady, fiery throb, a distraction he couldn't afford. The avian predators had been a brutal lesson. This world wanted him dead in a dozen different ways. But The bigger concern now was the prickle on the back of his neck, the old, ingrained sense of being watched. It hadn't faded since the fight. If anything, it had intensified. He'd spotted the glint, just for a nanosecond, from a ridge line 2 kilometers north. Not a natural mineral gleam. Something shaped, reflective. Observation? Rescue? He knew, with a cold certainty that settled in his gut, it wasn't rescue. The frantic, garbled distress beacon from his ship's wreck had gone unanswered for 6 days. Anyone out there was watching for a reason. Eli moved. He abandoned the relative safety of the overhang, taking his meager possessions. The sharpened strut, the crystal talons, a sheet of plasteel for shelter, a small bundle of dried razor feather meat, and the most precious item, a partially charged plasma cutter from the ship's engineering kit, its emitter frayed and unstable. He headed not for open ground, but into the twisted, monolithic forest of silica trees, their glass-like branches clattering in the toxic wind. It offered cover, and, more importantly, it was a terrible place for anything large to chase him. Vorax watched the humans retreat on his wrist-mounted tracker. The creature had implanted a micro-tracer from one of the drones during the razor feather attack. It was cunning but not omniscient. A slow, predatory smile spread across his face. The prey was fleeing. Good. It confirmed its instincts. But it fled towards a more complex battlefield. An interesting choice. He moved with a ground-shaking, deliberate pace. His armor, the color of dried blood, deflected the acid drizzle. His plasma caster hummed with power. He followed not just the tracker, but the signs, a disturbed patch of fluorescent moss, a scuff mark on a silica root. The human was careful, but on this alien world, it was still leaving a trail. Vorax could smell the faint, coppery scent of its blood. Deep in the silica forest, Eli stopped. The prickling sensation was a screaming alarm now. He found what he needed, a narrow ravine cutting through the forest floor, choked with brittle, crystalline undergrowth. He worked fast, his hands steady despite the fear. He used fibrous vines to tension the plasteel sheet into a shallow, concave shape, anchoring it between 2 trees over the ravine. He carefully arranged the sharpened crystal talons and several long, needle-like silica shards on the ground beneath it, points upwards. Then he gathered the strange, bulbous pods that hung from the silica trees, translucent and filled with a pressurized, corrosive sap. He placed these delicately around the edges of his trap, camouflaging them with debris. Lastly, he took the unstable plasma cutter and jury-rigged it to the plasteel sheet with wire, creating a crude capacitive discharge. It wasn't a weapon to kill. It was a weapon to surprise, to disorient, to funnel. He then climbed out of the ravine and concealed himself 20 meters away, upwind, behind a thick, iridescent fungus, the sharpened strut in one hand, a heavy, jagged piece of silica in the other. Vorax arrived at the ravine's edge. The tracker pulsed right below him. He peered down. He saw signs of recent passage, a snapped branch, a footprint in the soft mineral dirt leading into the shadowy cleft. It was an obvious ambush point. Too obvious. The human was trying to lure him into a confined space. A crude tactic. A Jurgerin would never fall for such a... His foot, as he took a confident step forward to scout the ravine's entrance, brushed against a nearly invisible vine. It was the trigger. The world erupted in a cascade of shocking violence. The plasteel sheet, tensioned like a spring, snapped upwards with a deafening twang, not to hit him, but to launch the array of crystal talons and silicon needles in a vicious cloud directly at his face and primary visual sensors. He roared, throwing up an arm instinctively. The needles shattered against his armored forearm, but one talon scored a deep groove across his helmet's optic sensor, partially blinding his left side. Simultaneously, the disturbed pods burst, spraying corrosive sap in a wide arc. It sizzled against his armor, and a few drops found a joint at his knee, searing through and biting into the flesh beneath. He bellowed in pain and surprise. Then the plasma cutter discharged. It wasn't a focused beam. It was a wild, arcing burst of raw energy that grounded through the wet metal of his armor. Every nerve in Vorax's body screamed as the electrical surge overloaded his systems. Muscles locked. His HUD flickered and died. He stumbled, crashing to one knee, his world reduced to searing pain, chemical burns, and deafening noise. That was the moment Eli struck. Not from the ravine, but from the side. He moved in absolute silence, a gray ghost in the mist. As Vorax struggled to clear his vision and rise, Eli brought the heavy silica rock down with both hands, not on the armored head, but on the weapon. The impact connected with the plasma caster's power cell housing on Vorax's wrist. There was a crack, a shower of sparks, and the weapon's hum died with a sickly whine. Vorax backhanded blindly, a blow that could shatter stone. Eli was already ducking, but the glancing impact caught his shoulder and sent him spinning through the air to land hard, breath knocked out. Vorax rose, a titan of rage and pain. He ripped off his damaged helmet, revealing a reptilian face contorted in fury. I was milky from the sensor feedback. He saw the human, small and battered, scrambling to its feet. "You vermin!" Vorax's voice was a guttural roar. "You dare to trap me?" Eli didn't answer. He just stared, assessing. The monster was huge, armored, and, even wounded, unimaginably strong. His shoulder was probably dislocated. The trap had hurt it, blinded it in one eye, crippled its weapon and its leg. But it hadn't killed it. The calculus was simple. He couldn't win a direct fight. Not now. He ran, not in panic, but with a desperate, zigzagging sprint deeper into the forest, away from the trap, away from his own shelter. Vorax gave chase, his injured leg a burning agony. The rage was a fire in his veins. This insignificant creature had wounded him, had humbled him. The hunt was no longer about glory. It was about vengeance. He crashed through the crystalline foliage, a bull enraged, following the sound and the faint blood scent. He didn't notice the ground change. The human had led him onto a wide, seemingly solid plain of crystalline plates. Eli, lighter and reading the subtle color differences in the plates, had picked his path with frantic care. Vorax, in his pain and rage, did not. With a sound like a million windows breaking, the plate beneath Vorax gave way. It wasn't a bottomless pit, but a sinkhole filled with a viscous, gelatinous substance that glowed with a sickly bioluminescence. He sank up to his chest before finding purchase on a ledge. The substance clung, burning where it touched his sap wounds, and began to harden rapidly, acting like a powerful adhesive. He was stuck, trapped not by strength, but by geology and the human's deliberate pathfinding. Eli stood at the edge of the sinkhole, breathing raggedly, clutching his injured arm. He looked down at the raging, trapped titan. For a long moment, they stared at each other, predator and prey, their roles horrifically blurred. "You cannot kill me, human," Vorax snarled, struggling against the hardening gel. "My ship will come. They will find you. They will scorch this world to find your bones." Eli finally spoke, his voice hoarse but clear. "I don't have to kill you." He picked up a loose, heavy silica plate. "This world will do it for me." He pointed to the sky, where the bruised clouds were gathering again. "The acid storm in this region is 40 times more concentrated. It'll melt through your armor in an hour once it starts." He pointed at the gel. "That substance is highly flammable when dried. A single spark." He hefted the silica plate. "Or the nocturnal predators they mentioned in the survey data. The ones that hunt by vibration in the ground. You're making a lot of noise." He took a step back. "You came to hunt me. Now you're just part of the ecosystem." Then, to Vorax's utter disbelief, the human turned and walked away, fading into the shimmering, deadly forest. He was leaving him, not finishing him, not taking a trophy, just leaving him to the planet. As the first heavy, burning drops of the storm began to fall, sizzling on his exposed head and shoulders, Vorax felt a new emotion pierce through the rage and pain for the first time in his long hunting career. It was the cold, hollow touch of dread. Silence was a weapon Eli had learned to wield. In the echoing void after his ship's catastrophic failure, in the hiss of the acid rain, and now, in the wake of the monster's roars fading behind him, it was his only ally. His body was a symphony of pain, a dislocated shoulder, the searing chest wound, burns from acidic splashes, and a deep, bone-deep fatigue. But the silence in his mind was absolute, a survivalist's focus honed by years of deep space hazard ops. He didn't celebrate outwitting the alien hunter. He calculated. The hunter was trapped, not dead. It had a ship. It had communications. It had spoken of others. Wounding a predator only made it more dangerous. Letting it live to call for help was suicide. He found a hidden crevice beneath a massive, fallen silica trunk. The space was tight, barely large enough to curl into, but it was shielded from the rain and the sky. Here, he performed the grim task of relocating his own shoulder, biting down on a piece of leather from his boot to stifle the scream. The pain was a white-hot nova, then a dull, manageable throb. He reapplied the lichen poultice to his chest, rewrapped his wounds with strips of his torn flight suit, and forced himself to eat the last of the tough razor feather meat. His mind worked. The hunter was large, heavy, technologically advanced. Its armor was tough, but it had weaknesses, joints, sensors, power sources. The environment was his arsenal. Acid, pressure-sensitive flora, unstable geology, and the native predators. The hunter saw a world to conquer. Eli saw a machine to be dismantled, using the world's own components as his tools. He needed to know more. He needed to see the hunter's ship. If there was a way off this rock, it was there. And if the hunter's friends were coming, he needed to know when and how many. Back in the sinkhole, Vorax was a volcano of impotent fury. The acid rain fell, sizzling and etching his armor. The gel had hardened, locking him in place up to his pectorals. He had managed to activate a distress pulse from his personal comm before the gel encased his arm. The juggernaut would receive it. They would come, but it would take time. Tommy might not have. The human's words echoed in his mind. Nocturnal predators that hunt by vibration. He forced himself to be still. Every thrash, every roar of frustration was a dinner bell. He switched to internal life support, minimizing his thermal signature. He was a Jurger in Hunter Prime. He would not be ended by mindless beasts or environmental hazards. He would endure, and when his crew arrived, he would lead them on the greatest hunt this galaxy had ever seen. He would peel the human's skin slowly, savoring its screams. The thought was the only fuel for his will. As the planet's long, gloomy day faded into a deeper, more dangerous twilight, Eli moved. He used the gathering darkness and the increasing noise of the storm as cover. He circled back towards the original overhang, then beyond, towards the ridge where he'd seen the glint. He moved like a shadow, every sense stretched to its limit. He found the hunt ship nestled in a shallow canyon. It was a brutal, angular thing, all weapons and armor plates the size of a small shuttle. Its hull was scorched from atmospheric entry. A single, dim light glowed from the viewport. No external sensors swept the area. Arrogance. The hunter never considered his prey would come to his den. Eli observed for an hour. No movement. No sign of other crew. The ship's ramp was down, an inviting but likely trapped entrance. He looked at the terrain. The canyon walls were sheer, unstable shale. The ship sat on a slight incline. His eyes, adapted to the gloom, spotted runoff channels from past storms cutting through the canyon floor. A plan, cold and ruthless, formed in his mind. He wasn't going to board the ship. He was going to bury it. He spent the rest of the night in a fever of quiet labor. Using his sharpened strut and hands, he carefully diverted one of the larger runoff channels. The acid rain was his ally, softening the ground. He piled loose shale and debris into a fragile-looking but strategically placed dam at the channel's head, using the sticky, gelatinous sap from a nearby plant as a weak adhesive. The dam wouldn't hold back water for long. It just needed to hold long enough. His final act was the most dangerous. He scavenged near the ship's stern, finding the exhaust ports for its thrusters. Using the last dregs of power from his broken plasma cutter, he superheated several of the crystal talons until they were red-hot and malleable, then wedged them deep into the ports, bending them into obstructive shapes. It wouldn't stop the engines, but it would cause a massive, unstable backflow on ignition. As the first sickly light of dawn filtered through the toxic haze, Eli was back in his hiding spot near the sinkhole, exhausted but alert. He watched. Right on cue. He heard it, the deep, subaudible thrum of powerful engines. A larger ship, sleek and menacing, descended through the clouds, the Juggernaut. It hovered over the canyon where the hunt ship was parked. In the sinkhole, Vorak saw it too and let out a roar of triumph. Here. I am here. His calm crackled to life. Hunter Prime, we read your distress. Location confirmed. We have located your hunt ship. Sending recovery team. No. Vorak snarled. The human. It is near. It is cunning. Sweep the area. Thermal, life signs, everything. It must not escape. Acknowledged. Recovery team is deploying to your coordinates. Scans initiating. On the Juggernaut, the scan operator frowned. Sir, I'm reading unstable seismic activity around the hunt ship's location. The recent acid rain has compromised the canyon walls. And there's a strange blockage in the hunt ship's primary thruster ports. Organic and metallic debris. The Jurgerin commander on board, an older veteran named Kral, scowled. The human, possibly, is a crude but effective sabotage. Ignition could be explosive. Kral made a decision. Have the recovery team extract the Hunter Prime first. Then, we will secure the hunt ship with grapple beams. Do not attempt to power its engines. 2 armored skiffs shot from the Juggernaut, heading for the sinkhole. At the same moment, the ship's powerful broad-spectrum scanners activated, painting the landscape. Eli, pressed into his crevice under the silica log, felt a tingle as the scan passed over him. His makeshift shelter, combined with the mineral composition of a log and his own suppressed vitals, must have confused the sensors because the beam passed on. He saw the skiffs descend towards the trapped hunter. Now, he took the heavy piece of silica he'd kept and, with a final heave of his good arm, threw it at the fragile dam holding back the diverted runoff channel. The impact was precise. The dam, already stressed, collapsed. A torrent of acidic water, mud, and loose shale, amplified by the night's rain, roared down the diverted channel. It didn't hit the hunt ship directly. It hit the unstable canyon wall directly above it. With a grinding, colossal rumble, an entire section of the cliff face sheared off and slid down in a devastating avalanche, burying the hunt ship under thousands of tons of rock and sludge. On the Juggernaut, alarms blared. Hunt ship is buried. Avalanche was triggered. The runoff channel was artificially diverted. Kral stared at the screen in shock. This wasn't a fight. This was geological warfare. In the sinkhole, the recovery team had just secured a line around Vorak's and was firing cutters at the hardened gel. He watched the avalanche on a squad member's feed. His triumph curdled into something dark and cold. The human hadn't tried to fight the rescue. It had struck at his property, his legacy, his means of pursuit. It was a message of stunning, pragmatic brutality. Then, Eli made his final move of the phase. He stood up from his hiding place, in clear view of the second skiff that was providing cover. He didn't run. He lifted his good arm and made a gesture, a slow, deliberate drawing of a finger across his own throat. A universal symbol. Then, he pointed directly at Vorak, still half-trapped in the sinkhole. He made sure they saw him. He made sure Vorak saw him. Then, he turned and vanished again, not into the deep forest, but towards the vast, uncharted sulfuric flats to the east, a hellscape even the native predators avoided. The message was received. On the skiff, the Jurgerin warriors looked at each other, then at their struggling commander. The prey wasn't hiding. It was declaring war, and it had just won the first major engagement without firing a single energy weapon. Vorak, finally freed and hauled onto the skiff, dripping with gel and acid burns, said nothing. He stared at the spot where the human had been. The rage was still there, but it was now frozen, compressed into a diamond-hard core of pure, unadulterated hatred. The hunt was no longer a sport. It was an existential contest. He looked at Crawl on the view screen. "Scour this continent," he said, his voice a deadly whisper. "Bring the juggernaut low. Use everything. Sonic agitator, terrain burner. Flush it out. I want alive. I want to look into its eyes when I break it." But as the skiff rose, Vorax looked out at the endless, hostile landscape. The human wasn't just surviving in this hell. It was using it as a weapon. And, for the first time, a treacherous thought insinuated itself into the Hunter Prime's mind. What if they weren't the hunters anymore? What if they were just the next obstacle for the most dangerous thing this planet had ever seen? The sulfuric flats were a vision of hell. Geysers of caustic steam erupted at random from cracked, yellow-stained ground. Pools of bubbling, iridescent sludge emitted vapors that made the air shimmer and burn the lungs. There was no cover, only a vast, open oven of poison and heat. It was by any sane metric a place to die. Eli ran into it without hesitation. It was the only move left. The hunter's capital ship, the Juggernaut, now hung in the sky like a malevolent black moon. Its scans would penetrate any forest, any canyon. But here, the thermal chaos, the chemical interference, and the seismic noise from the geysers would scramble sensors. This was his cloak. His body was failing. Infection burned at his wounds. Dehydration clawed at his throat. The acid mist seared his skin. Every breath was a gamble. But his mind held onto a single, stark equation. They expect me to die here. So I will not. He found an unstable patch of crust near a roaring steam vent. Using his metal strut, he pried up a plate of rock, creating a shallow, coffin-like trench just large enough for his body. He lined it with his last sheet of insulating material from the wreck, then slid inside and pulled the rock plate mostly over him, leaving the smallest gap near the steam vent for the fumes to help mask his heat signature. It was a desperate gambit. The heat was suffocating, the fumes narcotic. He tied a rag over his nose and mouth, focused on the pain to stay conscious, and waited. Above, the Juggernaut unleashed its wrath. Sonic agitators sent pulsing waves of disorienting sound across the forest and canyons. Terrain burners, massive plasma projectors, seared swathes of land, igniting the silica forests into infernos of glass and flame. They were trying to flush him, to drive him into the open or bury him in rubble. From his trench, Eli felt the ground tremble with distant concussions. They were obliterating the landscape. The sheer, wanton destruction was staggering. This wasn't hunting. It was extermination out of peak. It confirmed his coldest assessment. These beings understood only dominance. They could not conceive of an opponent who didn't fight on their terms. On the Juggernaut's bridge, Vorax, now bandaged and pulsing with injectable painkillers and stimulants, watched the destruction with grim satisfaction. It is in there. It has to be. Burn it all. Crawl, the veteran commander, stood beside him, uneasy. Hunter Prime, the Concord surveyors are already querying the seismic and energy discharges. This level of environmental disruption on a Class 4 world is a violation of silence. Vorax roared, turning his one good eye on Crawl. "Do you wish to explain to the High Chiefs why you allowed a human to maim a Hunter Prime and destroy his ship? We erase the human. We erase the evidence. The planet's chaos will cover our actions." Hours passed. The bombardment ceased. Scans swept the flats, confused by the thermal soup. "No life signs above Class 2 insectoid," reported the operator. "If it went into the flats, it is dead. Nothing could survive there without sealed armor." Flax sneered. "You assume it follows rules. Deploy hunter-killer drones. Grid search. Visual confirmation only." A swarm of disc-shaped drones shot from the Juggernaut, skimming low over the treacherous ground. They were resilient, equipped with multi-spectrum optics. Inside his rock coffin, Eli heard the high-pitched whine. He saw shadows flit over the gap in his cover. He stopped breathing. He became stone, A drone paused directly overhead, its sensors probing the steam. For 10 agonizing seconds, it hovered. Then, a violent geyser erupted 30 meters away, showering the area with boiling spray. The drone, buffeted, moved on to scan the more obvious disturbance. Night fell, deep and absolute on the lightless flats. The temperature plummeted. The geyser steam condensed into a freezing, acidic fog. Eli shivered violently, his body pushed to the very edge of hypothermia. He knew he couldn't stay. He would die of exposure by dawn. The hunter's ship was the only source of technology, of possible escape. It was also a fortress. He had to get on board. He had one card left to play. The hunter thought him a cornered animal, either dead or dying. The hunter's focus was on the ground, on the hunt. Arrogance again. He remembered the Juggernaut's hull, its configurations, the exhaust ports, the sensor arrays he'd observed as it hung in the sky. Every ship had a weakness. Using the cover of the freezing fog, he crawled from his trench. His movements were slow, robotic, fueled by sheer will. He made his way to the edge of the flats, closer to where the Juggernaut loomed, a dark silhouette against the starless sky. It had landed now, a few kilometers away on a stabilized plateau, a sprawling fortress of alloy and wrath. He saw the drones returning to a ventral bay for recharge. He saw the patterns of exterior lights, the shimmer of its energy shield, a standard kinetic barrier, ineffective against slow-moving objects or environmental matter. He formulated a plan so insane, so suicidal, that only someone with nothing left to lose would attempt it. He would use the planet's own violence as his insertion vehicle. He spent the next hours gathering materials from the edge of the flats. Long, flexible tubes of a rubbery plant that resisted acid, more of the sticky sap, and chunks of porous, lightweight rock. He worked with numb, bleeding fingers, constructing a crude, airtight capsule just large enough for himself, weaving the plant fibers into a harness. He filled the porous rock with water from a relatively less toxic condensate pool. It was a desperate, primitive life support system. His target was one of the Juggernaut's massive atmospheric processing intakes, visible as dark, grated openings on the ship's lower hull. They were shielded against debris, but they had to move vast quantities of air. They would have periodic suction cycles. As the planet's feeble dawn began to glow, Eli triggered his endgame. He dragged his primitive capsule to the foot of a massive, chronically erupting geyser. He secured himself inside, linking his harness to a heavy stone anchor with a vine he could cut. He pointed the capsule's opening towards the geyser's vent. He took a deep, burning breath of the foul air, cut the vine, and kicked the anchor away. The next eruption was not water, but a colossal blast of superheated steam and gas. It hit the capsule like a cannon. The world became a violent, tumbling, pressure-filled nightmare. Eli was battered, blinded, sure he was about to be cooked alive or dashed against rocks. But his calculations, born of desperate observation, were horrifically correct. The force of the geyser launched his capsule in a high, searing arc through the sky, directly towards the landed Juggernaut. To the ship's sensors, it was just another piece of environmental debris, a chunk of rock and organic matter ejected by the volatile planet. It passed through the kinetic shield without resistance. It slammed into the hull near the starboard intake with a crunch that shattered the capsule and most of Eli's remaining hopes. But the impact was close enough. As the intake grates cycled open for a purification surge, the violent suction grabbed the shattered remains of the capsule and the semi-conscious human within and pulled them into the dark, echoing bowels of the starship. Eli landed in a dripping, steaming heap on a filtration mesh deep inside the ductwork. He was broken, bleeding from new wounds, his hearing gone from the explosion, his vision swimming. But he was inside. He had done the impossible. He had turned the hunters' technological superiority and environmental disdain against them. He was no longer prey hiding in the wilderness. He was a pathogen in the bloodstream. In his quarters, Vorax was reviewing the drone footage one last time. Nothing. The flats were dead. The forest was ash. The human was gone. A hollow, unsatisfying victory. He hadn't broken it himself. The planet had done his work. He turned from the screen, a bitter taste in his mouth. A soft alarm pinged on the bridge. Carl looked at it. Atmosphere processor in Sector 7B is reporting a minor blockage. Organic debris from the planet's surface. Filters are engaging. Handle it, Vorax said dismissively, looking out a viewport at the scorched, smoldering world. He had won, but it felt like ash. Deep in the duct, Eli pulled himself upright using the mesh. The filtered, clean air of the ship felt alien in his seared lungs. He was surrounded by the deep, rhythmic thrum of the starship's heart. He was inside the beast. He looked at his hands, scarred, burned, but still capable of holding a tool. He looked at the complex machinery around him.